Israel's atrocities in Gaza are absolutely evil and unconscionable. That's what Tucker Carlson is saying here in this clip, where he exposes the negative side, the dark side of the U.S.-Israeli alliance. And in this clip, he gets into why that relationship with the United States isn't beneficial for Americans, and why they use Qatar as projection in saying that there's so much influence from that government in our system, when we all know the truth that it's Israeli influence in our government. Let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Qatar is a lot better for the United States than Israel has been. A lot better by any measure. And if you disagree, tell me a way in which Israel has been better for the United States than Qatar. You could say, well, what about Jerusalem? And that's an excellent point. There's no city in the world more important or more beautiful, more humming with spiritual energy than Jerusalem. But Jerusalem existed before the state of Israel existed, and it will, God willing, be there forever. So that's a distinct thing, right? That's a historical and spiritual site. It has nothing to do with the government of Israel. But tell me how the government of Israel has been better for us than the government of Qatar. And of course you can't. So you've got two options. A, you can scream at people and call them Islamists and say you're not really a Christian. You must be worshiping Allah or something. You're a suicide bomber if you go to Doha. And that, intimidates the crap out of a lot of people. And they're like, it's not worth it. Never mind. I'll be quiet. But over time, that doesn't work. Or you can drop politics and statecraft and national interest. You can just change the terms completely of the conversation. You can stop talking about what's best for your country, because neocons are never going to win if those are the terms of the debate. What's best for our country? They're not even contestants in that.
Exactly right. And, I always make the case against any entangling alliances. I think they're destructive for all the reasons that Jefferson and Washington said they would be, that you inherit all the enemies of your allies and you get into debt over these absurd empire-building projects, which the United States has done, especially in the last century and especially in the last half century. But I will make the case here. Qatar hasn't sucked the United States into countless absurd regime change wars in the Middle East, with Libya and Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq being the models. These have been catastrophic, and all of them virtually, and indeed Somalia, have been, at least in partial, tied to the U.S.-Israeli alliance and the idea that we can empire build in the Middle East. Also, Qatar doesn't steal U.S. secrets and have the U.S. ambassador, Mike Huckabee, meet with the convicted felon that served as an Israeli spy within the United States and served a 30-year prison sentence for that. That was Jonathan Pollard. And then you had Mike Huckabee meeting with Jonathan Pollard, the Israeli spy that did that, and we're just supposed to believe there's nothing wrong with that. And not only that, the White House stands by its ambassador. That's what their press release said after that happened. So those are just two reasons why we wouldn't want that to happen. They're also not tarnishing our free speech in the United States with anti-Semitic hate speech laws that do everything that the liberal establishment wanted to do in terms of policing disinformation and policing, attacks against the woke agenda, and the idea that men can't get pregnant was seen as a big threat. They want to do the same thing with anti-Semitic speech laws. So that's what we're dealing with.
No interest in what's best for our country, of course. But you can change the conversation to theology. And you can just say it point blank. God demands that you support the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, who would be vulgar and dumb and reckless enough to say something like that? Who would actually invoke God himself to justify a political alliance with a foreign country?
We all know. We all know.
You'd have to be someone who's not worried at all about the afterlife to say something like that, because that is a reckless thing to say. And if you've already guessed Ted Cruz, you're absolutely right. Watch.
I will tell you, there is a movement among Christians, particularly young Christians. The public polling numbers of support for Israel among young Christians is plummeting. And they're being spread lies They're being spread lies, isolationist lies, that we should withdraw from the world because nobody wants to hurt us. But they're also being spread theological lies. They are being taught replacement theology, which is a lie that the promises God made to Israel and the people of Israel are somehow no longer good. They are no longer valid, that when God made a promise, he didn't mean the promise he made. And instead, it is an argument that the Christian church has replaced Israel and the Jews are no longer God's chosen people, and all of the promises throughout the Bible are now a dead letter. The church needs to engage and say the Bible is not silent on Israel. The Bible is crystal clear on Israel. And in the church, we will stand and fight.
It's so absurd in so many ways, and I'll just start with this. He said that essentially non-interventionists want to get out of these entangling affairs because we believe that no one's a threat to America. And that's not the argument. Actually, the argument generally is that we endanger ourselves via these entangling alliances more so than we would otherwise. And just compare the Monroe Doctrine period to the last 100 years, and I think you can see how that's clear, how we're sucked into these entangling affairs in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, in the Pacific over empire-building schemes there, in South America and regime change experiments there, that we wouldn't otherwise be, for again, the same reasons why Washington and Jefferson were right. And I'm sorry, no, Jews are not the chosen people under Christianity. Every single basic tenet of Christianity throws that to the wayside. The gospel is for all. And if you don't believe me, read Galatians 3. That's the best chapter that explains that the gospel is for all. There is no chosen people on the basis of ethnicity. And God's promise to Abram in Genesis 13:3 doesn't change that whatsoever. Not only wasn't that a bond between God and Israel, which didn't exist, classical Israel didn't even exist at the time of that promise, that was speaking about a bond toward Abram, who would become Abraham and his kin, not the classic kingdom of Jerusalem. And that assurance had nothing to do with the modern Israeli state. It's just so absurd in every single way, but yet so many people buy into this.
Man. You know, it's one thing to get all worked up at the Waco Rotary Club about issues related to Texas, but, here you have a guy who's deep into the things that actually matter, the questions of what happens after we die and what's true, and he has no idea what he's talking about. Like, literally no clue. And I'm not guessing. I'm not attacking the man's faith. I'm just remembering very vividly, because it was this summer when I asked that same guy, Ted Cruz, okay, where specifically does the Bible tell Christians that they have to support Israel? And he had no idea. He meant to misquote a phrase in Genesis, but he couldn't even name the book. And by the way, most people couldn't, and it doesn't even mean that. But whatever, if you're going to have a theology about it, shouldn't you know where it is in the Bible? Shouldn't you be fluent in it? No, because it's all fake. It doesn't mean anything. But
yeah, that's exactly right. That's what he's doing. But again, Galatians 3 asserts that God's promise to Abram was fulfilled in Christ, and now there's a unified body in Christ that does include Gentiles. I'm sorry to say, Ted Cruz, you Christian Zionist. It includes a grand body, much bigger than this ethnically confined one that is now the church. It doesn't require obedience or subservience or support for a modern Israeli state whatsoever.
Says it anyway, and this topic actually matters, because it deals not simply with the fate of nations, but the fate of humans. It's real. So to talk like that, the Bible is crystal clear on Israel. Okay. What is Israel as defined by the Bible? I asked him that question too. What does the word mean? What does it refer to? Yes, there are a lot of references to Israel.
It means those that struggle with God. That's what it means, and that was the name bestowed upon Jacob after he literally wrestled with God, and that's what the phrase means. But again, this doesn't obligate Christians to support genocidal regimes, especially the one in Israel, support all of its wars, a war versus Iran, double down on U.S. aid to Israel whatsoever. Not in the slightest.
And to God's love for his people, the Israelites, the Jews, for sure. But in 2025, what exactly does that correspond to? Israel. Okay, and he kept looking at me. Israel, it's Israel. As Huckabee says, Israel. ISRUL. Okay, got it. Can you define that for me? Is it the modern secular nation state of Israel? The drag queen story hour in Tel Aviv state of Israel? And what borders? Does that include the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria? Does that include Gaza? Does that go all the way to Iraq? I mean, what are we talking about here? Shut up! The Bible's crystal clear. Well, of course it's not. But one thing the New Testament is crystal clear about, because it's in every book on every page, is that the way to God is through Jesus. And there aren't any caveats that I've seen. I'm no theology student. I'm no Ted Cruz.
Yeah, that's right. The most basic tenet of the gospel is for all, and Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And the only way to the Creator is through Jesus. It's not through support for a modern Israeli state. Period. No matter what Cruz and charlatans will tell you.
But in every page, it's the same point. The way to God is through Jesus. And by the way, these are Jews speaking, as the early Christians were, and they were speaking to Jews, to their fellow Jews. And they were saying the way to God, repent of what you're doing now and turn to Jesus. That's what they were saying. Maybe Ted Cruz has another analysis of it. But there's an entire New Testament about this one question. And by the way, if that's wrong, explain how. But of course, they never will. They never will explain how, because they don't care. And by the way, there are evangelical Christians in the United States who have a fully developed theology on this question. I don't understand it, and to the extent I do, I don't agree with it. But I don't hate them. I know that I said I did once. I was just frustrated, and I'm sorry, and most of them are really nice people. But I think any person reading a conventional interpretation of the New Testament would conclude the central, really the only unchanging command throughout the entire thing, from Matthew to Revelation, is believe in Jesus. Everybody.
Yeah, that's right. And Tucker's also right. Most of Jesus's apostles were Jews. They were telling their fellow Jews at the time, what you're practicing is wrong. Jesus has fulfilled the old law, not abolished it. He's fulfilled it. And now the only path to salvation is through Christ. This was a very controversial thing that put most of them to death. It truly did. And Jesus forecast that. He said, you will struggle many ways for my sake. That is true. And some of the earliest converts were Gentiles. And again, this was controversial, but people like Cornelius was converted into Christianity. And this has always been a lightning rod issue, because there was never, in the 1800 years of Christendom, Christian tradition, there was never this understanding that the gospel obligated people to support a new Israeli state. Not whatsoever. That only came into play in the mid-19th century with people like John Darby and others that said that this was, the new way to interpret the gospel in the right direction. But that was unheard of in 1800 years of Christendom. And it's only been further pushed into the populace and the political zeitgeist through America's entangling alliances with this modern state that are counterintuitive to America.
Everybody. There are no special deals described at all. Everybody believes in Jesus, and that's how you get to God. And people who aren't going to live forever. And I don't see another way. But people like Ted Cruz, of course, are not interested in debating theology, and he didn't even know what book it was in. They're interested in shutting down any conversation on what's in America's interest, making it a theological conversation. And why are they interested in doing that? Because the last justification for supporting Israel above all other countries has evaporated. And what is that? It's the claim that Israel is a uniquely moral nation. And that's why Christianity and also Old Testament Judaism is so often invoked. People of the book, people of God, no one would contest that. But what does that have to do with what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing in 2025? Of course, it has nothing to do with it at all.
And it, in fact, contravenes it. It contravenes all the starvation campaigns, all the subjugation that Israel engages in the West Bank and in Gaza, a refusal to entertain the notion of a two-state solution, the idea of mowing the lawn, going into Gaza periodically, and killing mass Palestinians. That's what they mean when they say that. This idea of a greater Israel project is not the prerogative of any true patriot in America that cares more about the domestic concerns about America, which, by the way, are made a lot worse through this alliance when we get this absurd amount of debt. We've given them something like $350 billion since the creation of Israel. It's only skyrocketed since October 7th. And then we have to be made complicit by our tax money for their genocide in Gaza, giving them intelligence and weaponry, and fighting many of their wars, with, again, frauds in the United States supporting it. You know, it's not just Israelis and the Israeli government that are guilty. It's certainly not just Netanyahu. It's Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and their allies in the United States, George Bush, Paul Wolfowitz, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, all of them complicit in this murder spree.
The unique decency of Israel is the reason they are our only real ally. And the problem is that what's happened in Gaza over the last 2 years has shown that not only is that not true, it's very close to the opposite of the truth. Now, a lot of us have spent a lot of time doing our best to ignore what's happening in Gaza on the grounds that it's kind of not our fight. Yes, there are weapons. Yes, we're paying for all of it. Yes, we're giving them cover at the United Nations. Yes, they're really kind of doing this in our name. Bibi is running around the world saying, I've got Trump in my pocket. I can do whatever I want. Trump will defend me. He's told a lot of people that. I control the United States Congress. I control the White House. I control the U.S. He's said that on tape. If you haven't seen it, look it up.
Yeah, Tucker's right about that. In a famous 2000 leaked clip, he tells the videographer, turn off the tape for a second, and then he launches into this soliloquy about how Americans are easily moved. And I hate to say, that's true. We have been on Israel. I hope that no longer is that the case, because it's a total embarrassment and slap to the face to see that being said, and yet it has been true. I hope it comes to an end. There's a lot of evidence that Americans are turning away from this, but our political system is still captured by the Zionists, by AIPAC. And the corporate media is too, but Americans are turning their heads around 180 on this issue in record numbers right now, and that at least inspires and gives me hope.
But a lot of us have thought, look, got enough problems, don't want to get into it. But if you ever do look into what's happened in Gaza since October 7th, it's shocking. Now, it's not the only atrocity on the planet. The Israeli government is not the only bad government. Tons of bad governments. I covered the Liberian Civil War in 2006. There are a lot of bad governments, okay? But among so-called civilized governments, no one has behaved like the Israeli government has behaved in Gaza in a very long time, 80 years at least. It's almost unbelievable.
Yeah, that is accurate, but I will say there are some comparison points, like, say, my criminal government in the United States killing about 5 million people in the war on terror. You know, for the sake of regime change, for the sake of supposedly making America safe, deposing Gaddafi and Assad and Saddam and the Taliban would do that, even though you're replacing ultimately the Taliban with the Taliban. The United States killed about 1 million Iraqis alone, so it's my criminal government that is murderous too. But the thing that just is so unpalatable to most Americans about Israel's atrocities is the United States' connection to Israel makes us complicit in some way. Certainly makes our criminal politicians that support this complicit by giving our money to support this twisted cause.
Tens of thousands of children killed by a country with the most precise military technology in the world, a country that somehow got explosive pagers into the pockets of Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon. These are people who are, again, world-renowned, famous for their skill and their precision. Look at the bombing attack during the 12-day war on Tehran. was precise. They didn't take out downtown Tehran. They took out IRGC leaders. They took out specific people. They knew exactly where they were. So the idea that they've killed tens of thousands of women and children, non-combatants, accidentally is a lie. No, they murdered them. They murdered them. It's just a fact.
It is, and their own data, a leaked database shows that they know that 83% of the casualties in Gaza were people that were not connected to Hamas or Islamic Jihad as they purport. Like, this is all about Hamas. They're using human shields. You know, they discount these lives and make them into like a second-class tier of people by saying that they're just human shields and we can kill them indiscriminately. Why? Because Hamas uses tunnels. Hamas takes hostages. Well, guess what? That wouldn't fly in the United States. You couldn't take 5 children hostages into a school with two treacherous individuals and then just drop bombs and kill all 7. You just couldn't. It wouldn't fly. It would be premeditated murder. But they use that as an excuse. And their own data says that they are not predominantly killing terrorists. They're killing civilians, plucking up babies from the rubble, and we're supposed to just be totally fine with that. We're supposed to double down on the Zionist Hasbara propaganda and be like, Israel has a right to defend itself. See, look at what they're doing, when it's actually they're carrying out a genocide. And thankfully there's a ceasefire now, but the root causes haven't exactly been addressed, have they? So it's gonna rear its ugly head again, unfortunately.
You can call it whatever you want. Genocide. Everyone's all, why? It's genocide. Okay, it doesn't matter what you call it. That's murder. You're killing people on purpose. Oh, but that always happens in war. It certainly does. Innocents die in war. That is absolutely right. But in no modern conflict in my lifetime have this many innocents died without any apology at all. So what sets, you hope, the United States government, or has during most of my life, apart from other governments like the government of Israel, is when we kill people who didn't do anything wrong, like children, we are penitent. We apologize. Sometimes we put the people who did it, as in My Lai, for example, in Vietnam, on trial because we don't kill people who didn't do anything wrong, period.
Yeah, I hate to say, here's where I'll push back against Tucker. That's not the case. These mass bombing escapades, not only in my lifetime, but going back to the firebombing in Dresden, the firebombing of Japan, the atomic bombs, the killings of mass innocents in the war on terror in general, show that the United States does this too. And I hate to say it. So it is both the Israeli government and the United States that does this, all in the name of empire building. And the United States is certainly complicit. So that's where I will, diverge from Tucker on this to some extent. I know Tucker has skewered those same policies, so I'm kind of actually confused in a way why he's being so declarative of this, that we don't do this, because, yeah, the criminal government in the United States does this, and you can find videos of Tucker Carlson saying this over and over again pertaining to those exact theaters. So I'm not sure exactly what he's getting unless I'm interpreting him uncharitably here, and I'm not trying to. Let me know in the comments below if you think that he has a point, that somehow that the United States doesn't do this too, because the United States does do this too, and that's one of the biggest problems of non-interventionists with our government.
And yet, for over 2 years, Israel has murdered tens of thousands of children on purpose, and then locked the doors of Gaza, shot dozens and dozens and dozens of journalists so no one can film what's happening, and just leveled the place so they can move the people out and take it. What's the justification for that? What's the excuse? Well, of course, there isn't one. Again, Israel's not the only country that's behaved that way in history, far from it. But no modern country has behaved that way in my lifetime.
Yeah, well, the excuse seems to be that God promised us this. God promised us this country that would engage in genocide, and if you don't support this and you don't double down on this, you don't repeat the Hasbara line, you are the problem, and supposedly you're perverting the scriptures. It's so absurd, but that is what a lot of Christian Zionist charlatans like Ted Cruz are going with. And it's just so inexcusable. I'm so glad that the American right and the dissident right is finally waking up on this in so many regards. It used to be mostly just Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan that would speak about this and how it's, really, it shouldn't be you have to pick between the Palestinians and the Israelis. There's this side that no one talks about in that arrangement, and it's the American side, the American classic non-interventionist side that Thomas Jefferson promoted and George Washington promoted. He issued the Neutrality Proclamation at the height of the French Revolution. That, global spanning conflict in a way took place in Europe, but had ramifications throughout the world that everyone wanted to choose a side and said, no, we don't have to choose a side. And in fact, the American thing to do is not choose a side. Well, America has been made complicit in the atrocities of Israel, and Tucker's exactly right. Something like over 20,000 children have been massacred by Israel, starved out, ethnically cleansed, and Smotrich is up there in a West Bank settlement, literally living in a West Bank settlement, saying there will be Israeli settlements in Gaza. They're saying that this cleansing will continue regardless of what's happening with this ceasefire now. And history indicates they're not exactly bluffing on that one. And the U.S. should just get out of there. Get our bases out of the Middle East. Stop slapping our servicemen in the face with these absurd deployments and putting them in harm's way to the point that you have to pray that Iran, even when backed into a corner, doesn't launch attacks against our troops. And by the way, they didn't. Why? They don't want a war with the United States, even though Israel once continued war with Israel, keeps talking about it. Netanyahu's continued to clamor with the same propaganda used to prop it up, saying that, they're going to detonate a nuke above Boston or New York City. He has recently said that to Ben Shapiro, and Shapiro is happy to parrot that propaganda to get the United States back in this thing and enter into a regime change with U.S. boots on the ground. Not Israeli boots on the ground, but U.S. boots on the ground. That's what they want, and they won't stop with that propaganda until they get it. They've been saying that Iran is close to a nuke for days, minutes, months, weeks, basically since I was born. That is what is the truth. But what do you guys think? Do you think Tucker Carlson's right? Is the U.S.-Israeli alliance twisted? Are the atrocities in Gaza indefensible? Is there any benefit Americans get whatsoever from this alliance? Well, alliance in quotes, I should put it. Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. One of his best monologues I've seen in a long time. It's classic Tucker at his best. And I'm so glad that he is out there on the American right telling the truth about this issue when the neocons have sold lies about it for so many years. But also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll send you off to a website. You just plug in your email there, and I'll send you that PDF of that book to you free of charge, just because I appreciate you watching. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
The Israelis were definitely involved. Ehud Barak is living at his house. I mean, okay. And we have a lot of his emails that prove that, and I'm not defending the Israeli government, which is hard to defend. It's pretty clear who some of the players were. They were governments, the U.S. government involved, British government involved, Israeli government involved. If we're honest, we already know that. So, I mean, of course, I'm completely for disclosure of everything.
Israel had an undeniable role in Epstein's crimes. We know that, and Tucker Carlson is saying that here, explaining why he believes that, who else was involved, and why there's so much more to this story under the surface that hasn't been covered. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
There's a lot of these people walking around, and I just know a handful of them. And then you look at the politics, and look at this shit, the Epstein files. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a national security threat. They're fake. This is like, what the fuck, man? The American people are fucking screaming at you, screaming that they want this shit released. Yeah. Congress, I don't even know the number. What is it like? I can't remember. How many people are in Congress?
535 Senate plus House. 435 in the House.
Everybody except one person.
Yep.
I don't know. Who is the one person?
Some guy.
Yeah. But And so like back to earlier, like we want to make an impact. We want to tell the truth. We want to, do these. And we had a big influence in the last election. Seemed like a great thing.
Did it matter?
At the time, it felt great. Was that a good thing?
You can't.
Now we got a guy who's, America first, all this other fucking bullshit. And everybody is screaming, release these fucking files. We want to know what is going on. We want to know.
What would we find out if they were all released? Anything we didn't know?
Honestly, I have no idea. Is it the end of the fucking country? Like, is it really that bad?
C.S. Lewis has this. Well, I have tons of opinions on the subject. I don't have, concrete proof. But of course, I think I know. But C.S. Lewis has this. I think it was C.S. Lewis has this essay in which he says, people debate, was Jesus really God or whatever. If Jesus came back to Earth tomorrow and held a press conference, like a week later, people would be talking about something else. It's like, we actually know what's true. We know what's true. And the way that dogs know what's true, you can't reason with a dog. The dog can smell it. And he sticks with his opinion because he has no other input.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, but of course we need to know the details because we need to know the names connected to this thing. This thing that was probably an Israeli blackmail operation manifesting as this child sex trafficking ring that prominent people were involved in. So no matter how harmful that is to certain subsections of the political class, tribe A, tribe B, I think it's more likely to be harmful to both tribes, and really they seem like a singular uniparty tribe most of the time. Americans want answers. It's not to say that people wouldn't try to bury that or forget about it. It probably would, but it would also decipher the corruption at the core of the government, which is really important to us dissidents who want that corruption to be put forward, for there to be transparency so that people on the outside, maybe political laymen, maybe people that don't have a particular disposition toward politics, can see things as we do and know things as we know. That would be an important way to do it. The guy who voted against the Epstein Files release was Clay Higgins from Louisiana. I can't wait to be seeing what his constituents in his district in Louisiana say about that. I wouldn't want to be him defending covering up a child sex trafficking ring and Epstein's crimes and the documents, especially when the victims are standing for release. And even Trump relented in the end.
If you hate a dog, you can't talk your way out of it. The dog knows you hate the dog because dogs have unerring instincts, and so do we. And so, of course, we know exactly what the Epstein story is about. It's about the deep corruption of global leadership, of course. And you can say it's about Israel, it's about the CIA. Well, is there a distinction, really?
No. There doesn't seem to be a distinction between the CIA and Israel, or in particular Mossad these days, that's for sure.
Not just between Israel and Mossad and CIA, but about the British government, or really kind of any government, or any, Bill Gates or Leon Black. It's all kind of varieties of the same thing. It's corrupt leadership that is acting on its own behalf against the interests of the people they lead. It's the oldest story there is. It's the Pharisees. And if we're honest, we already know that. So, I'm completely for disclosure of everything, but I don't lie to myself and say that disclosure would change human nature, because it won't. And people have an opportunity to exploit others, generally will. And the rest of us need to fight daily against that, not because we're going to win in the short term, but because it is our duty and to serve what's good and true.
Yeah, I'll disagree with them to some extent. I think a true release, and by the way, I mean by that a true release, not unlimited redactions and classified documents that never see the light of day, which will happen, by the way. A real release, I do think, would change the way multitudes of Americans would see the government, would see who has been involved in these crimes, where the money trails came from, which person on each side of this was involved, how deep this goes into the underbelly of the bureaucracy, the legal community, of the business community. I think Americans, many of them, would change their perceptions to government in the same way that many Americans' perceptions toward government changed in light of the COVID regime. They'll never be the same again. after withstanding that gaslight campaign, after they withstood the CIA involvement in the JFK assassination. Probable CIA involvement in that changed people's mindsets. It's not going to change the entire populace, but I do think that would change a lot of people's mindsets, and that's why there has been this cover-up. It's really the only thing to explain the cover-up.
Period, even if we're killed doing it. So, I don't know. I mean, I won't stop pushing for disclosure. I really believe that. Trust is built on honesty. It's not built on lies, ever.
You know, you say, you know, does it change? I can't remember your exact verbiage, but we were talking about, you know, when this gets exposed, does it change anything? No, this is the nature of man. This is what happens. But
we already know the answer.
Men need to be reset. And men have not been fucking reset, not in this country, for a long time.
That's coming, whether we want it or not. We don't want it, but it's coming.
And
all this shit about women don't need men. You've obviously seen chaos in a society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like actual chaos. People just like shoot into buildings and no one arrests them. Mm-hmm. You spent your life around that stuff. Those societies don't ask questions like, what are men for? You know what I mean? Right. And we're, of course, moving closer to that. And all.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be a novelty push. I don't focus on much of those issues on this channel, but that is a way to divide people against each other. And it seems to be coming from a regime that wants us squabbling with our neighbors on those cultural lines that they don't really care about. They would care if we joined together against them on the financial corruption and on the wars and on the Epstein stuff, joining with people we otherwise might disagree with on immigration and, you know, guns and abortion and the culture war and stuff like that. But definitely they have a concern when it comes to what we would align on that would disrupt their stranglehold on power over us.
All of this, all of our silliest manifestations, you know, the trans craziness or feminism or other just revolts against nature are only possible because we live in this nerf world of affluence. But as that starts to change, and it is changing, then the upside of that, we're going to get poorer and the society will become more dangerous, but we'll also be a little more rooted in reality. In the same way that rich people are insufferable, not all, but a lot of rich people are insufferable because they're detached from reality, from nature, from God, from like the things that are real, and they convince themselves because they can fly from point to point without going through TSA that they have infinite power, and they don't, and that's why they're so hard to have dinner with. But a normal society doesn't have these problems. It has all kinds of other problems, but doesn't have the American problems of like, you know, I'm a 40-year-old unmarried Citibank executive. I'll just get a surrogate. It's like, okay. For the suicide rate, there's not a lot of suicide in, you know, impoverished countries because like the mission is really clear. Eat.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to this. I also think this is essentially a government program that's not totally organic. We saw this pushed from the early 2010s to the mid 2010s when you saw the culture war come in and disrupt the Venn diagram of kind of alignment. There was some between the Tea Party movement and Occupy talking about the financial corruption in government, especially in regard to the TARP bailouts. That was a little bit before the early 2010s. But this is when you saw a mass injection of trans issues, war on women, you know, racism, sexism, homophobia. And if you don't believe me, this isn't just anecdotal. You can go on LexisNexis and do searches. Those words come up in a firestorm of explosivity in those years. It was injected into the consciousness of Americans so that Americans would fight over those issues, rather than fighting them on the empire building schemes and the corporate welfare schemes and the deep state corruption. I think that is responsible.
You know, there's not a lot of crisis of meaning in Burundi. You know what I mean?
It's a fight for the day.
Yeah, it's a fight for the day. Well, it's a trade-off. I mean, I would much rather live in a DoorDash society because I like comfort and ease and everything, but it is a trade-off, and you trade comfort for meaning. That's just kind of what we've done, and we shouldn't be surprised by it.
What do you think happens, honestly? If this, do you think this is actually is this gonna come out? Or has it all been shredded? I mean, you know, Mark Epstein said this is...
No, of course. I mean, we don't have the JFK files.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you ask, like, why don't we?
who is being protected here. There are no living stakeholders in that story. There's no living participant in that murder conspiracy. It was a conspiracy. We know that. So who were the participants in that conspiracy? Well, no one's still alive. So who could we possibly be protecting?
Well, that's a good question, and I think the answer is clear. It's the institutions that had, a stake in the corruption, had a major role in the corruption that ended JFK's life. We know even from the documents that were released that the CIA played a major role in tracking Lee Harvey Oswald beyond what they had originally said, that information of wiretapping Oswald was withheld from the Warren Commission, that James Angleton played a much more major role in that wiretapping than we ever knew before, that James Angleton, the same CIA operative, also had a special relationship with the director to work on special projects, and he maintained the U.S. relationship with Israeli intelligence. Like, he was the biggest catalyst for that relationship. He essentially owned it on the American side. And that the CIA engaged in more, schemes to assassinate foreign leaders, Rafael Trujillo specifically in the Dominican Republic, than we knew. And if the American people knew about the corrupt institutions that govern the deep state, they would be much more apt to call for their dissolution, call for their abolishment, and that's who they're protecting. It's not necessarily a single figure. Those single figures are just figureheads in a mass machine that's a systematic issue. And the systematic corruption and the regime change and propaganda apparatus, it's institutionalized in the deep state.
By not releasing all of those files, and that's a pretty short list of suspects. So I think we kind of know what that is, at least in part. I don't know the details. I know some, but I think it's pretty obvious. Same with Epstein. It's pretty clear who some of the players were. They were governments, the U.S. government involved, British government involved, Israeli government involved at various levels. The guy lived a fairly long life. He died in his mid-60s. He was pretty active in government work, arms trading, for example, from a young age, from his late 20s, I think, when he left Bear Stearns.
This is true. He got in bed with arms traffickers like Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi, who was one of his clients for a time. Adnan Khashoggi playing a major role in the Israel side of Iran-Contra, because if you remember, if you were alive at that time, the arms went from the United States to Israel as a conduit, and then from Israel to Iran. And it was that way because it was prohibited by law for the U.S. to send to Iran those arms directly. And Adnan Khashoggi, the consummate Saudi playboy, played a role in that. And Epstein linked up with those guys, probably, from what we can glean from the information that is available, because of his money laundering skills that were a part of those arms trafficking processes as well.
He got into that business with Robert Maxwell. You don't trade arms by yourself. You do it on behalf of governments and with the assistance of governments. Obviously, you've been around this, So from that age, from say 30 to 65-ish when he died, so 35 years, he's intersecting with governments. It's not just the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis were definitely involved. Ehud Barak is living at his house. Okay. And we have a lot of his emails that prove that, and I'm not defending the Israeli government, which is hard to defend, but I'm just trying to tell the truth, which is it's not just the Israelis. Okay. It's us. It's the British, the French. It's the usual players, the intel services that matter in the West and probably others. So that's who's being protected, of course, and then all kinds of other pawns.
Yeah, I agree with this. The evidence shows that clearly. There's like a 7-part investigation by the heroic journalists at Drop Site News, Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm on this. Epstein worked on behalf of the Israeli government. It's totally undeniable at this point. He arranged security agreements between Israel and the Ivory Coast, between Israel and Mongolia. You can see this from the leaked email exchanges. He set up wire transfers to one of Israel's most prominent spies. We can see in the leaked email address him confirming the bank accounts to this spy, Yoni Koren, who, by the way, also lived with them for a time. He set up a back channel between Putin and himself to figure out how they could financially prosper under the Syrian civil war that had the U.S. help depose Assad for the sake of al-Qaeda, set up back channel negotiations, brokered that organization of peoples to try to profit from this. We know that there's more, including him trying to solicit funds from the Rothschilds Bank to support Israel's cyber weapon warfare. This is all part of their stories. It's very substantiated, and yet that lead's totally buried. The corporate media isn't talking about it at all. Very few people in the independent media are talking about it, but it is corroborated.
And so I think one of the main takeaways from that story, about which I know a lot, but not everything, is that the leaders that we believe are leaders, and people are starting to get this, like our elected officials, oh, they have so much power, or Senator so-and-so, President, what's his name? You know, like these are the people running our society, are not the people running our society. Of course, they themselves are subject to enormous pressures from, you know, other people and coalitions of people and forces and interests. And like, that's what they're, and the closer you get to them, the more time you spend with the people who are in charge, the more you realize they're not really in charge. One of the things we've learned is that the people who are really kind of running America's foreign policy, whether it's Lindsey Graham or whomever, these people are not geniuses at all. Like, they're dumb. They're dumb. They're just mediocre.
They are. They're manipulators. That's all they do. They play a role to extract money from the U.S. populace and send it to their cronies in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and Israel, of course. And that's their job. They perform that job, some of them for 3 or 4 decades, like Lindsey Graham, right? Like Mitch McConnell. They've been doing this for their entire life. It's their career to do this, to redistribute funds from the working class in America to the politically connected elites, and do it while propagandizing it for different reasons, to support democracy, because it's for the children. It'll help flourish. You know, it'll help people flourish around the world. It'll safeguard American interests, but Americans are seeing through that.
Jeffrey Epstein is my favorite example. Because Jeffrey Epstein lived his life basically in the shadows, like you couldn't really know where the money, you still don't know where the money came from, or like, what's the goal of this? What is this? You can't know because it's all secret. Classified, national security, da, 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 da. You start to assume that Jeffrey Epstein is this like Svengali, and he's a genius, and he's controlling everything. And then you read his emails. He's like a fucking moron from Staten Island who can barely speak English. He's like dumb. He's totally impressed by Harvard. He went to Cooper Union. He's impressed by Harvard because the brand name impresses him. It's like wearing a polo shirt with a horse on it. He thinks that's cool. He's totally unsophisticated, actually.
Well, I'll somewhat disagree with this. So I've spent over 20 hours analyzing individual Epstein emails from these recent leaks, not only Ehud Barak's emails that got leaked and had a lot of Epstein's in there, but the ones from the House Oversight Committee. And I agree with Tucker. There is unsophistication in terms of his writing. He was a horrible writer, spelled everything wrong, terrible at sometimes in kind of conveying his thoughts. But also a lot of the evidence behind the emails, like we knew about even before this, shows that he was sophisticated in money laundering, and that's how he made his career at Bear Stearns. And, you know, his mission at first was to be an options trader on the options desk, not an actual trader, but sitting alongside one. Didn't succeed in that, so he was moved into a different unit that worked on, you know, working with clients to launder money to other places to save them in terms of taxes, trying to do that legally. But in the process, he learned a lot about that. And as Whitney Webb puts in One Nation Under Blackmail, he wasn't just an idiot stooge in this regard. He actually did succeed in that. And that's why figures from the deep underbelly of the intelligence community did want to reach out to him. That's why he was on a jet with Douglas Leese to the Pentagon just after he left Bear Stearns. So partially agree, partially disagree.
And not smart at all. He's crafty. He's got high canine and animal intelligence, but he's not a genius at all. He's a dummy. He's a thug. And that has been like kind of amazing to see. His only real advantage is that he's evil. He'll do anything. He's got just no limits at all. Like, you need to kill someone? We'll do that. If we have to, we'll do that. And that person, the unscrupulous person, does have an advantage because there are no boundaries, right? So if your goal is to get rich or powerful, you can get there faster if you'll do anything to get there. Doesn't end well, ever. Didn't end well with him. But that's really what I learned, is that the people who are mad at me call me names because that's literally all they can do. Shut up! You can't speak at that event. we don't want you on stage. We're deplatforming you. Okay, I don't care really, but like,
Who's saying that to you?
oh yeah, I mean,
what
drama. I don't even want to go through. I don't want to make it about me, because I'm certainly not oppressed, and you haven't impressed my spirit. You could fucking shoot me, and you're not going to impress my spirit.
Well, I hope that's true. I'm glad Tucker's told the truth about this, and he's told it for months and months, including at that Turning Point USA event, where he stood up there and said, you know, Epstein was likely working for Israel. Before we had complete undeniable proof in the terms of these emails, he was saying that, and that had attracted the mass anger of Zionist donors to Turning Point USA. So I'm really glad they won't destroy his spirits. I'm also with him in that statement at the end there where, you know, Epstein did have a lack of moral boundaries. And when it comes to people that have a lack of moral boundaries, they aren't, you know, bound by the same constraints you and I would be. He was willing to do whatever it took to, you know, get off on this sick and twisted, you know, compelling force in his own mind, and just completely disregard the rights and innocence of other human beings to do that by the dozens. Even in his first trial, not a first trial, his first case in Florida, there was over 40 witnesses stacked against him. And then he got that sweetheart deal, which, by the way, the DOJ then actually apologized for later. And Acosta said, well, I was told he was intelligence and to lay off him. We know that. That's part of the documented record. Acosta said he doesn't. Now he says he never said that, but we know from the Trump transition meeting minutes that he did say that, because the Trump transition team later then made him the Secretary of Labor. It's just so absurd. I do disagree to some extent with Tucker as far as the sophistication of Epstein, at least in the realm of money laundering. He was proficient. We have a lot of evidence of that. But in terms of how he talked about other issues, certainly he was unsophisticated in those emails. He couldn't even spell or write properly. And some of his comments just... What jumps out the page on some of those comments is just such bitterness toward every other person around him, except if they were like the New York Times journalists that were corresponding with him, and including Landon Thomas and Michael Wolff, who he talked about, hey, how can we get blackmail on Trump? He hated Trump in the end. Absolutely. But he was corresponding with Bannon. Bannon was one of his closest compatriots all the way up until the end. Another angle to this story that's being completely buried. So yeah, Epstein was involved with Israel. It is a slam door case. You can read all about that on Drop Site News, that series that Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm have. Like I said, if there was a world where true journalism reigned, that would be the leading story. Wall-to-wall coverage over Epstein's ironclad and undeniable associations to Israel that most Americans have no idea about. They haven't followed this. And I don't think we're going to get true disclosures out of these Epstein releases. I wish we were. Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna fought like hell for it. Marjorie Taylor Greene was called Marjorie Trader Greene for it, of course, and then resigned. I hated to see that, especially the kind of pressure that was put toward her that she was going to then resign. It almost like shows that this is just going to happen to other people that try to buck the system and actually try to unveil transparency in these issues at great risk to themselves, even when they stand alone against not a popular president right now amongst the American populace, but a popular president right now among the Republicans in Congress. Her biggest political triumph. Massey's the only one that suffered these slings and arrows for so many years without apparently letting it get to him. And that's not to put Marjorie Taylor Greene down, because I would not want to put up with these slings and arrows. But I don't think we're going to see transparency in this case, unfortunately. But let's be real. We already know a lot of the connections. And they're the connections that the state most doesn't want us to know. And they're buried as the lead to the story, which it should be. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube, and I'll really appreciate your support. You'll be able to see those members only videos right away. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you to a site. You just plug in your email. I'll send you a copy in PDF form of that book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you viewing the channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.